Have you ever had everything fall apart at once? That was Elena's reality. At 39, she was a successful corporate attorney in New York, partner at a prestigious law firm, married for over a decade, financially stable. She had built what everyone around her called a perfect life. But then it happened. Her firm merged with another and she was let go, no warning. Weeks later, she discovered her husband had been unfaithful for years. And just like that, the life she knew vanished. The silence in her apartment felt like a punishment. No calls, no plans, no purpose. People offered the usual words, "You'll bounce back. You're strong. Everything happens for a reason." But those phrases felt hollow. Eleanor sat for hours doing nothing, just breathing through grief and confusion. She kept thinking, "I've lost everything, my job, my partner, my future." But underneath that silence, something was beginning to awaken. A shift too quiet to notice at first, because sometimes what feels like destruction is actually the foundation clearing for something deeper. And before she could rebuild her life, she had to learn how to listen, not to the world, but to herself. Elena had always lived in noise, deadlines, meetings, debates, schedules packed to the minute, and now, just silence. The first few days were unbearable. She kept the TV running, scrolled endlessly through social media, anything to avoid the stillness. But the distraction only made the emptiness louder. One night, unable to sleep, she turned everything off. No phone, no screens, just darkness and her own breath. And in that space, she heard something different. Herself. Not the version she'd built for the world, but the quiet voice beneath it all, the one that whispered truths she hadn't wanted to face, that she hadn't been happy for a long time. That her career, though impressive, had become a cage, that her marriage had been emotionally distant for years. Tears came, not of pain, but of recognition. This wasn't just grief, it was clarity. She started to sit in silence each morning, not as punishment, but as practice. Listening to her breath, her body, her thoughts. It wasn't easy, but it was real. And in that stillness, a seed was planted. A question began to rise. What if I didn't lose anything? What if I was being freed? A memory came to Elena during one of her silent walks, a story her grandmother once told her as a child. To rise, a hot air balloon must let go of the sandbags. The weight that once grounded it now holds it back. Only by releasing it can the balloon soar. Elena paused mid-step. Could that be what life was doing to her? Letting go of the things that once served her, but now only held her down. She sat on a bench, pulled out a notebook, and wrote down everything she felt was no longer hers. The job title, the pressure to always be composed, the fear of disappointing others, the role of perfect wife. And at the bottom of the list, she wrote, "The version of me I created to survive." She tore the page, folded it, and buried it in the dirt under a tree. Not to forget, but to release. That same week, she dusted off an old idea, a project she once dreamed of, creating a legal aid center for women in vulnerable situations. Something that had always spoken to her soul. Now, it finally made sense. Not as a backup plan, but as a calling. Over the next few months, Elena didn't just recover, she transformed. She downsized her apartment, started working part-time consulting to pay the bills, and with her remaining time, began building something. New a non-profit legal clinic began to take shape, focused on women, many of them survivors of abuse or economic hardship. It was hard, humbling, but it made her feel alive. She was no longer chasing approval, no longer holding on to titles or image. She was living from the inside out. She practiced daily silence, walks without headphones, conversations without rushing to respond. She learned to listen deeply, to others and to herself. Her presence became calmer, wiser. Friends noticed. "There's something different about you," they'd say, and Elena would just smile. Because she knew what changed. She had stopped living by expectations and started living by truth. She hadn't lost her path. She had just been redirected to the one she was meant for all along. Today, Elena stands in a very different place. She doesn't earn as much. Her days are quieter, less flashy, but she is fuller, freer, more herself than ever. She now sees loss through a different lens, not as punishment, but as a holy pause, a chance to return to what's real. Sometimes life strips us of the noise so we can finally hear the truth. Sometimes it closes every door so you'll finally look inward. What Elena thought was a breakdown was actually a breakthrough, and that silence she once feared. It became her sacred space, a place she returns to every day, to reconnect, to realign, to remember. So let me ask you, are you really losing something, or are you being set free? Don't run from the quiet. It may be leading you home. Share below. What loss actually became a gift in your life? Send this to someone who's in the middle of letting go. And always remember, you didn't lose, you were just being redirected.